The religious, if you notice, they're really terrible at talking to atheists because they really have no clue what atheism is or what atheists expect. They treat us just like theists, which we absolutely are not. They try to appeal to our religious side, which, speaking only for myself, I just don't have one. If they want to convince me, and that's supposedly what they're out there to do, there are very simple ways that they'd have to go about it, and they simply can't do that. So they just lie to each other, and they talk about us rather than to us. Because what the hell else can they do? Let's go find out. Today, we're going to go take a look at 10 things that someone at the Catholic news agency seems to think will help Catholics convince atheists that they've got the slightest clue. Yet this list, and many others like it, they just prove that the religious have no clue what the hell they're getting into. They don't understand what it is that atheists require, and as is no surprise, they just don't care either. Because this list isn't about convincing atheists. It's about comforting Catholics. Don't pretend we don't see it, because we do. So let's get through the list and see why the religious are so utterly clueless, and why, if they hope to ever have any chance whatsoever of convincing us that we're wrong, they need to get with the program. Because this is never going to do them any good. Once upon a time, not so long ago, atheism was the belief system that dared not to speak its name. Even the most ardent skeptic paid lip service to faith, or at least to the blessings that mankind derived from it. Yeah, that's because historically, anyone who didn't pay lip service to religion, they got their asses killed. They got imprisoned or socially ostracized. And that's a pretty big impetus to at least pretend to believe, right? When religion has all of the political and social power, they can make people behave just about any way they want. And that's not a good thing. That's religious terrorism 101. But the religious, they don't seem to see it that way, no surprise. Although they certainly would if it was another religion imposing its will on them through force of arms and social pressure. But hey, as long as it's them doing it to other people, it's all good, right? Yeah, not so much. But let's keep going. But that's not the case anymore. Atheism is a strong and growing influence in our culture. You can see it everywhere, from the bestseller table at your local bookstore to the Darwin mutated Jesus fish on the car in the traffic ahead of you. Atheists are comfortable declaring themselves atheist, comfortable promoting atheism, and comfortable decrying religion, which, according to some of the more prominent atheists, resides on a list of mankind's blessings somewhere between diphtheria and Nazism. Because, unfortunately for the religious, it is. And this is something that a lot of theists, obviously, have a problem accepting. The thing they have spent their lives clinging to, it's now being shown to be not only wholly irrational, it's also demonstrably harmful to society. It makes smart people dumb, and they don't like that, and I can understand why this would be a difficult sell. It just doesn't stop it from being true, and that's something they eventually are going to have to get through their heads. Of course, when that happens, they'll also have to stop being religious. And won't that be a good thing? And now that we're encountering it more often, Christians sometimes find themselves ill-prepared to deal with this kind of muscular atheism. Especially for a lifelong Christian, atheist arguments are so foreign that they don't know how to respond and too often lapse into anger. How dare you? Or fear. Well, what if they're right? Neither of which does anyone any good, harming the Christian's witness and leaving the atheist firmly entrenched in his atheism. Yeah, but it isn't more and more often. No Christian has ever been prepared to make a worthwhile case for Christianity, mostly because there is no reason to believe in Christianity at all. It doesn't matter if you're an ignorant layperson or the most supposedly well-educated apologist, none of them can handle a true skeptic. And that's why they don't want to talk to us. It's why, if they do deign to have a debate with an atheist, they're looking for someone who's just going to lob them softballs and grant them faith and personal experience as evidence for their beliefs. And I'm not willing to do that, nor should anyone else be. You shouldn't give someone who believes in alien abductions a free pass when they tell you that their ass hurts. Why would a Christian or any other believer get one for their personal feelings? It just makes no sense. There are standards in place, and no one gets to violate those standards because they just can't meet them. It just betrays the weakness of the Christian position. Now, I've heard a lot of them recently saying, well, we can't provide objective evidence, so stop asking. No, that's their failure, not mine. It's their fault that they believe something for which they can provide no good evidence. It's not my problem, it's theirs. Maybe they ought to be better. Maybe they ought to stop believing stupid, unsupportable shit. I don't have to let up because their beliefs fail. So this article goes on to say that so long as atheists are everywhere and Christians are usually not prepared to deal with them, well, here's 10 things that Christians, specifically Catholics, can do to influence atheists. It's pretty clear that neither of the people who wrote this list have ever talked to an atheist in their lives. So let's get started. Number 1, don't be afraid to admit that you have faith. Christians frequently report that they've been in situations where the topic of why they believe comes up, and all they can say is they have faith even though they've never done any major investigation. They often seem embarrassed by this defense. If you get caught in a conversation about why you believe and that's all you've got, don't be afraid to go with that. Articulate it as best you can. For example, you might explain that your faith is not just a story you tell yourself to feel good, or talk about what leads you to believe that you've had a real relationship with something outside the material world. Yeah, admitting you have faith isn't a positive for your beliefs. Faith is the excuse that you give yourself for believing things without any good reason. Anyone can have faith in anything. Flat earthers have faith. Alien abduction advocates have faith. People who think Bigfoot's running around in the woods, they've got faith too. Faith doesn't make anything true, and it's why I disallow faith as support for any claim. Any claim, not just the religious. If you have nothing objective to present, admit defeat and slink away. Faith is a delusion. Faith is an excuse. Faith is just stupid. It isn't something to be proud of. Number 2, don't assume that your atheist friends are secretly angry at God or feel something is missing in their lives. Work from the assumption that this person is an atheist because he or she simply has not seen any evidence that God exists. And that's decent advice, which I'm kind of surprised at, to be honest, since we're not mad at God. We don't believe God exists. We're not going to be bothered by your empty threats either. Hell doesn't faze us. Claims of a vengeful deity just make us laugh. Satan talk makes us roll our eyes. You have to prove that these things are real, and let's be honest, you people simply can't do it. And that's why all of this nonsense is completely unimpressive. You wouldn't be afraid of Voldemort, for instance. Why would I be afraid of God or Satan or anything like that? Because ultimately, it's all effectively the same. But the religious, they tend to get mad at that, don't they? They don't like to see God compared to Santa Claus or Darth Vader. It's why having any kind of intelligent discussion with them is so difficult, because they're convinced that these clear fantasy characters are actually real. That's not our fault, though. We're not to blame for their delusions. So let's stop giving them an easy out and call it like it is. Stupid imaginary crap is stupid imaginary crap unless they can prove otherwise. Prove with evidence. No other way works. Because otherwise, you've just got total religious nonsense. Number 3. Don't quote the Bible, but do know the Bible. The Bible is a source of great wisdom, but if you quote it to an atheist as an authority, it will be like your doctor explaining his diagnosis by reading a passage from a Harry Potter book. Don't just cough up Bible verses and expect that to convince anyone. There are reasons why the Bible says the things that it says. Know the reasons behind them and be prepared to explain them. Yeah, especially since we tend to know the Bible better than the religious do. Anyone who starts throwing Bible verses at me gets a double dose in return. I'm not afraid of the Bible. It's a great tool against religion. In fact, as Isaac Asimov once said, properly read, the Bible is the most potent force for atheism ever conceived. The fastest way to become an atheist is to read and understand the Bible. It's not doing them any favors to play make-believe that this book is helping them at all. It's just not. Number 4. Don't feel like you have to have all the answers right then and there. It is far better to simply say, well, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that, but I'd love to research it and get back to you, than to wade into territory that you're not familiar with. The problem is, they never have any answers. Ever. It's one thing to have to go and research a particular subject and then come back with a better defended position. But the religious never have that. They just come back with ignorance piled higher and higher. Because ultimately, they are just not concerned with reality. They have no evidence. They have no logical position. It's all feelings and zero facts. Don't let them get away with that. It's why I always ask, how do you know that? And how have you tested your assertion objectively to see if it holds intellectual muster? And they have no answers to that. It all goes back to faith, which is intellectually empty, or just wishful thinking, which is entirely irrational. If they say to me, well, I'm going to go and do my research, I never see them again. Ever, because they run for the frickin' hills. Because once you start questioning their basic tenets, that's when they start to get mad. They will throw insults your way and run away like a little child. It's just exposing the truth of religion. And they don't like that, do they? Number 5. Explain the big picture. Familiarize yourself with the historical case for Christianity and offer a high-level explanation for what makes this religion's claims compelling, that Jesus' life and death fulfilled ancient scriptures that all historians agree existed before his time, that almost all the apostles were martyred for their faith, that Christianity spread like wildfire despite horrendous persecution. Study the writings of the earliest Christians who were defending Christianity in a pagan world that was largely hostile to their beliefs. Sound familiar? Yeah, it does, because this is the kind of crap that the religious pull on other people. Notice that. But the problem is, there isn't a historical case for Christianity. Most Christians are actually ignorant of the truth. There is zero evidence that Jesus ever lived in any form. Zero. Not a single demonstrable eyewitness account. There's lots of claims, zero proof. Lots of convenient readings of the Bible, zero evidence that any of it is actually true. Because ultimately, they just don't care. They aren't remotely concerned. This is why they engage in bald rationalizations, not rational evaluation of their beliefs. Explain the difference. Only allow the latter. They have no defense against that whatsoever. Number 6, be logical. Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry. Don't deny the validity of logical scientific thought out of hand. It's true that science doesn't have all the answers, but it does have some of them. And if you try to deny that, you risk pushing yourself into crackpot territory. As Pope Benedict is always reminding us, the God in whom we believe is a God of reason. There's a long, learned history of rational arguments for Christianity, and if you can use them, you'll be speaking in terms that your atheist friend can understand. Get to know some of the great Christian philosophers and apologists. If you haven't read C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, what are you waiting for? If Mere Christianity, or any of his other apologetic works, since they're all effectively the same, is your go-to book, you're going to have some problems. Most atheists, they've read it too, and they know how to counter it. My library of apologetic books is almost certainly larger than theirs. I know my stuff. I know where their bodies are buried. The religious are left standing there with their jaws hanging open right before they head for the hills. Why? Because they expect their claims to be taken seriously. They don't expect us to know more about it than they do. And the second we show that we're better educated than they are, and we almost always are, they've got no freaking clue what to do. Number 7. Realize that your only goal is to plant a seed. In these discussions, we can sometimes get so focused on the details that we lose sight of the big picture. It is extremely unlikely that the person you're talking to is going to be completely convinced of the truth of Christianity in one conversation. Just defend Christianity the best you can, and remember that conversion is ultimately God's job, not yours. Oh yeah, this is the tactic that makes me laugh the most. It's not your job, it's God's. Because nothing fails worse than religious apologetics. And I've pointed this out before, how groups like STR prepare their students to fail miserably because that's usually what's going to happen. Atheists are having a battle of wits with entirely unprepared opponents. There is no defense of Christianity, and the religious are completely unprepared to handle the truth of their failures. And once again, that's why they run away and hide. Number 8. Put yourself in your atheist friend's position. What if, for example, Christianity was false and Greek mythology was actually true? What would it take to convince you of that? Yeah, but that's not the atheist position, is it? We don't think any religion is true. So they're not really putting themselves anywhere intelligent, because I think the religious are terrified to even try. There has to be some kind of God, because the thought that there might not be, that's just scary. To them. It's only scary to them. We think it's just fine. I don't think they have any idea how to actually put themselves in our position, because I don't think they can even visualize what our position is. It's clear from just talking to them that they're completely confused how anyone can live a good life without an imaginary friend. It's why they get pretty much everything entirely wrong, no matter how many times we explain it to them very, very clearly. It really isn't that hard if you think about it. But I really think they've got some problems doing that, at least intellectually. Number 9. Don't use a lot of Christian catchphrases. Christians give their hearts to Jesus, and the Holy Spirit indwells us, and we take a daily walk with Christ so that we're in the world but not of the world. You know, the bullshit that these fuckers throw around. All of these phrases are meaningful and profound and instantly understandable to almost any Christian, but they don't mean anything to people who are outside the faith. It's hard to avoid them because we're used to using them as shorthand for some very complex concepts. But you should be able to explain those concepts in plain terms anyhow. Except they can't. Those things are mental aberrations, not legitimate concepts. It would be like someone telling you that they slather themselves in tomato sauce in their worship of the flying spaghetti monster. That's going to sound absolutely insane to anyone not on the inside, mostly because it is. Yet the religious have insane beliefs and practices, and they can't imagine that they're not going to sound bizarre to others that they talk to. Because absolutely none of these things are at all demonstrable. They can think they're walking with their imaginary friend all they want. It's just not true in any objective way. And that's the expectations that we have. And if they want to talk to us, they need to understand our expectations and be able to meet them. And finally, number 10, pray. Don't make the mistake of relying solely on your own smarts when you have the Holy Spirit at your disposal. Pray for guidance for yourself and for a receptive heart within your atheist friend. You might be surprised at the effectiveness of this technique. It'll be good for you too. Yeah, because talking to yourself doesn't actually get you anywhere useful. Now, I know the religious feel better doing it, but it certainly doesn't grant them wisdom to actually produce the evidence that we're going to be asking for. I always ask them why God doesn't do anything useful. If God is advising them, why do they keep losing all the time? Why are their opponents not convinced? Why is God so useless? And they don't tend to like that, as should be no surprise. It's not really meant to be insulting, it's an honest question that deserves an honest answer. If they have the ear of the all-powerful creator of the universe who can do absolutely anything, why can't they answer simple, rational questions? Why can't they produce anything resembling objectively verifiable evidence? Why can't they do anything but sit there looking like a bunch of morons? Inquiring minds want to know. We're not encouraging anyone to go out and pick a fight. No one ever got harangued into the family of God. But with a little mental preparation, when the time comes, you'll be ready to present the case for faith in terms that are familiar to your non-believing friends and family members. And by all means, go ahead and pick a fight. Just be prepared to lose. I'd be happy if they ever scored a single victory once in a while, but they don't because they have no answers and they have no evidence and they have no clue how to get from there to here. I'm sure they think they can win once they run back to their religious safe space where everyone else is delusional as they are and they can make up any stories about what happened that they want. But trust me when I say that from the outside, their performance is downright pathetic. They aren't really accomplishing anything positive for the faith. The more the religious open their mouths, the more people they drive away. It's why Christianity is dying a slow and painful death in the Western world. The only place it's successful are the places where they can use political and social power to punish people for not doing their shit. Because people are recognizing that they've got absolutely nothing. Making a fool of yourself in the name of the Lord isn't doing yourself any favors. Maybe, just maybe, Christians should just knock it off. The problem with all of these, here's how to handle atheist lists, and I've addressed a couple of them in the past, is that the religious really don't understand atheists at all. They don't know what we're looking for, and they don't care. They don't understand how we look at the world, and they can't get it through their heads that we're not just like they are. The things that might convince the religious, those things are not going to convince us. I'm very clear on what it's going to take to change my mind, and they have absolutely none of that. My standards don't change to make this difficult for them. My standards are consistent. I have one and only one, and I'm not making another one just for them. The same things that it will take for me to believe in a God, those are the same things it will take for me to believe in Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster or space aliens or whatever. I don't play musical standards. They do. They can't produce what's required, which means they really have no business believing any of this nonsense in the first place, but they do because they get emotional comfort from it and are simply not concerned with the facts. And that's the problem. This is what they want to be true, rather than caring if it's what is actually true. Whereas I only care what's demonstrably true in objective reality. I have no attachment to any particular position. I just care if things are real. I don't care about emotional comfort. I don't care about feeling good or getting a dopamine hit in the brain. I care only if my beliefs are rationally defensible. The most comforting lie in the world, it's still a lie. And the most uncomfortable truth, it's still the truth. Facts do not depend on your feelings. It's about time these people grew the hell up. But does anyone think they will anytime soon? Yeah, I don't either. And that's just sad.
Bum